I'm a 27-year-old woman, and my older sister, Claire, who's 30, has turned my life into a rivalry I never agreed to join. 3 years back, she tied the knot with Eric, a 35-year-old guy with deep pockets. Since then, she's acted like I'm somehow less than her. My parents treat her like she's a shining star of the family, while I'm just the one who didn't lock down a smart future. I've got a steady job, not flashy, but it covers my bills, keeps me comfortable, and I'm pushing toward bigger goals. To Claire, though, that's me squander my potential. She loves pointing out that while I'm grinding away, she's basking in extravagance, shopping at high-end boutiques, jetting off to Europe, and cruising in a car worth more than what I earn in a year. At first, I brushed it off. If that's her version of happiness, great. But the digs didn't stop. She'd swing by my place and wrinkle her nose like she'd walked into a dump. "You should really consider a better place," she'd say, eyeing my furniture like it was secondhand junk. If I showed off a new outfit, she'd smirk and ask if it was from some cheap brand or if I'd finally splurged. When I shared a win at work, she'd let out a dramatic sigh. Why even bother? Just find a wealthy guy and live a little. The worst part? My parents soaked it all up. They acted like Claire's choices were proof of her brilliance, while I was a letdown for earning my own way. Family get-togethers turned into torture. Claire would roll in decked out in something outrageously pricey, tossing out remarks about her latest shopping trip to Paris. If I brought a dish to share, she'd quip about forgetting what budget food tastes like. Eric was civil but kept his distance. He didn't join in on Claire's jabs, but he never shut them down either. I started wondering if her high society life was as solid as she made it seem. Then came the moment that broke me. At a family dinner at my parents' place, everyone was supposed to bring something. I poured hours into crafting one of my best dishes, a homemade meal I was proud of. Claire showed up late, took one look at my contribution, and laughed loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Wow, you're still cooking your own stuff? Most people just order from somewhere nice." My parents chuckled like I'd done something foolish. Something in me snapped. I didn't argue or justify myself. I was done trying to prove anything with words. Instead, I smiled, took my seat, and made a choice right then. Claire thought marrying money meant she'd won at life. Fine, but I was going to show her that real success comes from what you create for yourself, and I'd do it without fanfare. That night, as Claire flaunted photos from her latest getaway, I stayed quiet. But when I got home, I got to work. I'd been toying with the idea of a side gig, something I could manage alongside my day job. Now I was all in. I dove into researching investments, freelance opportunities, and ways to build passive income. I kept it under wraps. No need to invite her negativity. A few weeks later, I scored my first freelance gig, earning more in one job than I made in half a month at work. Claire didn't know. Neither did my parents. And that felt like the best part. While they were mocking me, I was laying the groundwork for something bigger. After that dinner, I stopped chasing Claire's approval or my parents' validation. If they wanted to see me as a family underachiever, so be it. I had bigger priorities. I kept my full-time job but poured serious effort into my side ventures. Late nights, early mornings. It became like a second career. That first freelance gig turned into consistent work, bringing in more cash than I'd expected. Instead of splurging, I saved every extra cent, funneling it into investments that grew steadily. My friends noticed the shift first. They saw me skipping nights out, glued to my laptop, grinding away. When I finally shared what I was working on, they were all in, cheering me on, passing along job leads, introducing me to clients. Some even launched their own side hustles, inspired by my progress. My parents, though, were a different story. Every phone call brought the same question. "Have you met someone yet?" To them, I was toiling away for nothing. In their eyes, Claire had cracked the code to life by marrying wealth, while I was struggling pointlessly. Word of my side gigs eventually reached Claire, probably through my parents, likely with a "can you believe she's still at it?" tone. At the next family gathering, she couldn't resist bringing it up, with a smirk and a tilt of her wine glass. She said, "Still messing around with that little project of yours?" I didn't bite, which only egged her on. She rambled about how exhausting it must be to work so hard when I could just find someone and take it easy. Then came her usual spiel about aiming higher, by which she meant marrying into wealth, not building my own. I let her talk. Meanwhile, my income streams kept expanding. Freelancing was an instant success. Early on, I took small, low-paying jobs to build my reputation. Consulting started slowly, with clients coming in through referrals. Investments had their ups and downs. Some stocks tanked, and one rental deal fell apart. But I kept pushing, learning, adapting. Soon, my side gigs weren't just extras. They were my main income. The downside? I was stretched thin. Balancing a full-time job with side hustles was grueling. Some nights, I barely slept. Weekends vanished into work. But the results kept me going. Claire, meanwhile, kept parading her lavish lifestyle, designer handbags, upscale dining, 5-star trips. Every time she posted, my parents practically threw a parade. At one Sunday dinner, she bragged about dropping an absurd amount on a Milan shopping spree. My mom gasped in awe. My dad chuckled like she'd earned a trophy. I sat there, eating quietly, saying nothing. That week, I'd hit a financial milestone. Enough savings to think about buying property. But I kept it to myself. No need to share with them. The first hint of trouble in Claire's world came a few weeks later. She'd been planning a big trip to Dubai, but abruptly canceled without much explanation. Then a family friend mentioned something strange. Claire and Eric had been fighting a lot, and not just small spats. Serious arguments. Claire's attitude toward me got sharper, her jabs more frequent. If I wore something nice, she'd sneer that it was budget chic. If I drove instead of taking an Uber, she'd sigh like I was a lost cause. One day, while browsing online, I noticed something odd. Eric had posted photos from a business trip. Claire wasn't in them. She never missed those trips. Something was off. At another family event, Claire was in top form, taking shots at me every chance she got. She called me stingy for not moving to a fancier apartment, joked that I'd never live like her at this pace. I set down my drink and finally spoke. It's funny how much you care about my money when I'm the one in charge of it. The room fell quiet. Eric, silent all night, let out a quick laugh. Staring at his drink, he muttered, "Nothing wrong with standing on your own." Claire's expression froze. She switched topics fast, but the vibe had changed. For the rest of that evening, Claire was noticeably subdued, her tension palpable, and I couldn't help but observe. Eric kept his distance when she spoke, never standing by her side. A week later, a family friend let slip another clue. Claire's marriage wasn't the flawless picture she projected. After months of relentless work, saving every penny and dedicating every free moment, I finally achieved a milestone. I purchased my first rental property. It wasn't a grand estate, just a simple apartment in a solid area, but it was entirely mine. No loans, no help, just the fruit of my own labor. I kept it under wraps. No big reveals, no social media posts. This wasn't about seeking approval, but subtle changes started showing, and people took notice. I made small upgrades, a better laptop, a slightly newer car, treating friends to dinner without sweating the cost. It didn't take long for Claire to pick up on it. At the next family gathering, her eyes scanned me up and down, as she always did, like I was some kind of puzzle solve. Her first jab was swift, poking at my budget watch, though she'd never cared about my accessories before. Then she targeted my car, sneering that it was plain compared to Eric's. I didn't engage, didn't react. That only fueled her to push harder. Meanwhile, Eric's demeanor had shifted. He wasn't playing along with her barbs like before. In fact, he seemed annoyed. Then came a change in my parents. They still fawned over Claire at first, but cracks began to show. When she made a snide remark about my car, my dad's laugh was hesitant. And when I mentioned a recent work win, my mom's eyes sparkled with something. Curiosity, maybe? Perhaps they were starting to see I wasn't the letdown they labeled me as. My mom, usually quick to dismiss me, actually asked about my projects. Claire's smile was forced, barely masking her unease. Weeks later, the flaws in Claire's perfect world became undeniable. It started small, She mentioned Eric being difficult about money, brushing it off with a laugh that had a nervous edge. Then came more canceled trips. First Dubai, then Paris. Vacations she'd typically plaster across social media just weren't happening. Instead, she was spending more time at our parents' house, oddly fixated on my life for someone supposedly swimming in wealth. One weekend, I treated myself to stay at a nice hotel. Nothing lavish, just a personal escape. I didn't broadcast it, but when my mom mentioned it casually, Claire pounced, demanding details, where I stayed, how much it cost, what I did. Then, almost instantly, she pivoted to boasting about a luxury resort she and Eric were planning to visit. It never happened. The next time I saw Eric, he looked worn out, less interested in humoring Claire's usual theatrics. When she took another dig at me, claiming I'd never live her lifestyle, he raised an eyebrow. "At least she's got her own money," he said quietly. Claire's head whipped toward him so fast, I thought she'd strain her neck. I let the moment slide, but I noted it. Eric was shifting, and not in Claire's favor. Then came the tipping point. At another family event, things started normally. Claire's always was dressed to dazzle, tossing out comments about designer labels and subtle jabs at my modest way of living. Then, out of nowhere, she lost it. She turned to me and accused me of being obsessed with outdoing her, claiming I was desperate to prove something, as if my entire life revolved around making her look bad. I just stared at her and asked, "If your life's so perfect, why does my progress bother you?" The room went silent. Claire's jaw clenched. My parents squirmed uncomfortably, but the real shock came from Eric, utterly unfazed. He'd been quiet all night, but when Claire bragged about her latest splurge, he stiffened. "You know, Claire, you spend money like it grows on trees," he muttered, shaking his head. "Maybe it's time I stopped bankrolling your shopping habit." The room froze. Claire's smile tightened, but she brushed it off with a wave. A week later, her credit cards were cut off. Her face paled. My parents glanced at her, then at Eric, then back again. For the first time in years, they didn't rush to her defense. She stormed out, no grand exit lines, just raw embarrassment. For the first time, I didn't feel like the family's black sheep. I felt like the one who come out on top. After that night, word spread quickly. Claire, the untouchable golden child who'd married into wealth, wasn't secure as everyone believed. At first, it was just murmurs, another canceled trip, a sudden switch to budget-friendly restaurants. Family members who once envied her started asking hushed questions. Then came the confirmation. I ran into Eric at a business networking event. We'd never really talked one-on-one, but this time he approached me. After some small talk, he casually mentioned he'd had to cut Claire off financially. No more endless shopping sprees, no more lavish vacations, no more throwing cash at luxury for the sake of it. She burned through an obscene amount of money without a care, and he'd finally put his foot down. My parents refused to face reality. Whenever Claire's name came up, they insisted she was fine, that marriages have their ups and downs, that she and Eric were just working through things. But their worry was clear, the nervous looks, the quick subject changes. Claire, meanwhile, clung to her image. She still wore designer clothes, still talked of extravagant plans, but the pieces didn't fit. The trips never materialized. The new purchases weren't new. Her stories grew more over the top, as if saying them louder would make them true. Meanwhile, my investments were thriving. My rental property was generating steady income, my freelancing was expanding, and I was making smarter financial moves, even eyeing early retirement. Something I never thought possible. Claire must have sensed it. Suddenly, she turned overly sweet, complimenting my work ethic, asking vague questions about my financial strategies. At first, I thought it was another of her games. Then she got direct, talking about how family supports each other, how sometimes people need a little help to get back on track. After one particularly strained conversation, she finally admitted it. She needed money. She framed it carefully, not as a loan, but as help. Just something small to tide her over until things stabilized. I said no. She didn't take it well. First, she laughed, thinking I was kidding. When she realized I meant it, her attitude shifted. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, muttered something about family loyalty. I didn't argue or explain. I just said it plainly. Financial responsibility is a choice. A week later, rumors started swirling. Claire and Eric were separating. At first, it was hard to believe. Claire had built her entire identity around her perfect marriage. But the signs had been there. Eric had been pulling back, no longer indulging her antics, no longer playing her game. Now he was done. One night, Claire showed up at my door, her makeup streaked, her hair disheveled, dressed in plain clothes for the first time in years. She said she was losing everything. Talked about how tough things had been, how I couldn't possibly understand her struggles. She'd been trying to keep up appearances, but her messages grew frantic. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted one night. "I don't have a plan." She tried to play it cool at first, but the cracks were growing. When she came to my door, it wasn't just anger in her eyes. It was sheer panic. But I wasn't going to clean up her mess. I told her what I'd said before. She treated money like it was infinite, and now she was facing the fallout. She left furious. The next morning, I heard she started telling people I was selfish, that I'd turned my back on family, that I didn't care about her. My parents jumped to her defense, texting, trying to guilt me. They called me heartless. Said money isn't everything, that Claire just needed a little support to get back on her feet. I ignored every message. That was when I let go of the golden child narrative. For years, I'd been measured against Claire, made to feel lesser because I didn't marry into wealth, didn't live extravagantly, didn't play the part they wanted. But now Claire was the one faltering, and I was free. Claire hit a low she never thought possible. Rock bottom. The divorce was finalized. Eric was done, and without him, her world crumbled. It wasn't sudden, but the signs were clear. First, it was small cutbacks, skipping certain events. Her Instagram shifted from flaunting luxury to preaching about simple joys. When she lost a house, she called it downsizing, but she couldn't fake it forever. The apartment was gone, the car repossessed, no backup plan in sight. The fancy car was taken, the credit cards canceled. She had no savings, no assets, nothing to lean on. Instead of owning it, she played the victim. Naturally, my parents embraced her return with warmth and affection, rather than urging her to find work. They pampered her, allowing her to settle back into her childhood room. They treated her situation like a minor hiccup, rather than the inevitable result of her decisions. Meanwhile, I pressed forward with my own life. I moved into a nicer apartment, not lavish, but a step up that reflected my increasing financial stability. I kept investing wisely and, for the first time, began guiding others on managing their finances, helping them steer clear of the same errors Claire had made. Then, Claire's demeanor shifted abruptly. She started acting contrite, expressing gratitude for a new beginning. She spoke about learning from her past missteps and starting anew with determination. Initially, it seemed she might have matured, but her sincerity was short-lived. Soon, she began dropping hints about needing assistance. At first, it was subtle remarks about the challenges of readjusting to ordinary life, claiming she just needed a little time. Then her requests grew bolder. She suggested staying at my place temporarily, just until she could stand on her own. She even casually brought up needing a small loan to kickstart her fresh start. I firmly declined, telling her directly that she needed to find a job, that countless people recover from tougher circumstances, and that she wasn't owed anyone's money. She didn't push back. Instead, she switched tactics, pretending to make an effort. She claimed she was job hunting, talking up her supposed determination, but no interviews materialized, no follow-ups, no real work. My parents bought into it completely. They kept pressuring me, accusing me of being callous, insisting that family supports family. They argued Claire just needed one opportunity, that I should give her a chance. I stood my ground. Then came the ultimate betrayal. Claire started making sly comments. "You're clearly thriving with those investments," she remarked one day, glancing at my laptop. Another time, she chuckled nervously, saying, "I wish I had your credit score." I brushed it off until a month later when my bank alerted me to a suspicious loan application in my name. Claire had stolen my identity, using my personal details to apply for a loan. thinking I wouldn't catch on. I confronted her immediately. She denied it at first, but when faced with evidence, she tried to excuse her actions, claiming desperation and pointing out how much I had compared to her nothing. I didn't bother debating. I filed a fraud report, and Claire faced legal consequences. My parents were livid, not at her, but at me. They called me cruel, accusing me of destroying her life over a mere mistake. They painted me as the antagonist for safeguarding myself. That was the breaking point. I cut off all contact. No more texts, no more visits, no more playing a family scapegoat. Claire had always looked down on me, but now she was the one floundering, and for the first time, I felt liberated. Claire escaped jail, but the damage was done. She was locked into a repayment plan, her credit ruined, unable to secure even a basic car lease, let alone luxury apartments or designer purchases. For someone who'd always sneered at ordinary people, it was a brutal wake-up call. Yet, instead of owning her actions, she deflected blame. First, she pointed fingers at Eric for abandoning her. Then she blamed me for not helping family. When that didn't garner sympathy, she turned on our parents, claiming they let her down when she needed them most. Meanwhile, my parents scrambled to control the narrative. They tried to portray me as the heartless sibling who turned his back on family, who punished Claire.